Hey developers, so what JavaScript frameworks and libraries has the most satisfaction in 2020 from web developers? So today we are looking at the State of JavaScript survey. This is a survey they put out every year. So I'm going to go ahead and look at some of the results that we have seen from this survey. I'm going to riff on it. I'm going to talk about what I think about it. And you might find some things that actually surprise you from the survey. They surprised me. So make sure you watch all the way to the end. Hey, and if you're interested in JavaScript, frameworks, Angular, React, Vue.js, I put a link in the description. If you want to get a free cheat sheet from me, you can click on it. You get signed up to my mailing list, and I'll email you with cool things like this when I make cool free videos. Yeah, check out my mailing list. The link's in the description below. So let's just jump on into it. So here is the website for the JavaScript survey. It's at 2020.stateofjs.com, and you can learn all about it. And it's really cool. They do this survey every year, and they even allow you to download the data. So if, I don't know, if you didn't believe them or you wanted to come up with your own conclusions, you can download the data. Now, on the left-hand side here is all the different categories. So we have introduction, t-shirt, demographics, features, technologies, other tools. I'm not going to go through every single piece in this survey. They are quite long. I would recommend, if you're watching right now, go and check it out yourself. So I'll give you my bridged notes of which things that I thought were most interesting. So first, I'm going to look at the demographics to figure out, who actually took the survey. Now, they actually reached 23,000 people this year in 137 countries. I think that's a record. I think they had less people last year. You can see here's the map of the world. See, definitely the highest percentage of people that answered were in the United States, and then in Europe and in Russia. You can see English was the highest language that most people responded in. Yearly salaries, this is always interesting. Since we're getting a worldwide view, I think this is going to be a little less than if we just looked at America. America usually tends to have higher developer salaries than the rest of the world. But still, it's a good chunk of people. 30% are making 50 to 100,000. And 100 to 200,000, 20%. So those would probably be those are the two highest categories of people. So, web development, you make good money. Now, years of experience, looks like a lot of beginners. This two highest brackets in here are people from 2 to 5 years and 5 to 10 years. So you can see a lot of people are taking the survey who are fairly new to JavaScript with just a couple of years of experience. Now, there is, there's some people who have done it from 5 to 10 years, and then the lowest greater than 20 years. But then that mid spot is from 5 to 10 years. So the company size, you get all different types of companies from small to big taking this survey. And then where did you hear about it? And then gender. I always think this is interesting because I wonder, if every year, if this is going to get better. Are we going to have more women and different people taking the service? But it's always 90% male, 6% female, and then a small chunk of non-binary. Now, race and ethnicity, once again, we're at 70% that is white, pretty much white males. That's most people who take this survey. And honestly, that's probably the makeup of a lot of people in the web development JavaScript ecosystem, unfortunately. But I think we're getting better every year with who can take this and getting more people into this industry from all walks of life, different colors, a lot more women. I think that's a great thing, and this seems to be going down every year. Job titles, the highest one is everybody's a full stack developer nowadays, which is fine. And then what industry sector? Mostly programming and technical, and CSS proficiency. A lot of expert CSS developers or self-proclaimed expert CSS developers who took the survey. So that's interesting to me. I think the most interesting part of the demographics is seeing how many men, male versus female there are, and then what kind of ethnicity takes these surveys. So look at the JavaScript flavors. This is really interesting to me, but not surprising, that TypeScript is still pretty much the number one flavor of JavaScript that people are using. Although I've never used PureScript, and it went down from satisfaction from 70% to 72%. And with this satisfaction rating, it can be a little misleading. It's you take the would use again divided by would use again plus would not use again. So it really depends on how many people said they wouldn't use that technology, and they come up with satisfaction. But you could see if you looked to interest, still TypeScript's the number one. Usage, still TypeScript's number one. Awareness, TypeScript still number one. It's like it's 100% of people are aware of TypeScript now. I mean, it is saturated everything. I remember a few years ago when people were like, oh, I don't know about TypeScript. I don't know. There's a lot of developers who didn't want to get into the TypeScript ecosystem, and now it's complete opposite. Everyone's jumped on the bandwagon, which is great. And interesting, the satisfaction with PureScript. But even though the PureScript has 72% satisfaction, the interest, like not many people know about it. That's that want to learn, not interested. So you can kind of take a look at the raw numbers here. You see that 72% want to use TypeScript, would use it again, and heard of it, would like to use again. But there's a very, very few amount of people who wouldn't want to use it. And then like PureScript, like most people have not heard of it. So it has like 75% of people have not heard of PureScript. I haven't heard about it either. But there's just a little tiny fraction of people that have heard of it that actually used it but wouldn't want to use it again. So that's why it's so high up on this satisfaction chart. So that's really interesting. I'll have to look at PureScript. So now here is the one I think most people are interested in that look at this survey is who is winning the front-end framework / library wars. You know, as you know, if you've been watching my channel, I'm a huge Vue.js fan. But, you know, understand React is really, really popular. And this is really surprising when I looked at this. If you take the satisfaction rating, which once again is would use again divided by would use again plus would not use again, Svelte is number one this year. So they have made their way up from, they were second last year, and now they are number one. So you can see here, it's just by 1 percentage point, so it's not that much. But you can see there's a lot of people who love Svelte, who use it, who would recommend it to other people, which is awesome. React is number 2, and then of course Vue is number 3, and they're all just a few percentages away. So I think satisfaction of all three of these frameworks are awesome. Now on the other end of the framework works, which you could see here if I scroll down, is this Angular one at the bottom and Ember, which is sad, which means that there's a lot of people who've used Angular or Ember and wouldn't use it again. I think this survey I think tilts quite a bit to React, and I don't think this is really fair for Angular Ember. And also in years past, people were saying, well, Angular, are we talking about Angular JS, or are we talking about Angular, the new Angular? And they never changed, they never separated that on the survey, and I don't know why they didn't. Maybe they made it, I don't remember, like if when you took the survey, if it was explicitly said this is Angular 2.x. But it seems like maybe that could be another reason why it's so low again. I don't know, but it seems like every year they're kind of low on the satisfaction rating. Now for interest, once again, Svelte's pretty high. That's if you want to learn plus not interested. But Vue is second in this case, so people who just kind of want to learn a new technology, Vue's right up there. And of course, if you look at just pure usage, tons of people using React. In fact, 80% of people put the usage, which is would use again plus would not use again divided by total. So React is definitely one of the ones, probably the most used library out there for front-end developers. Angular is second, and then Vue is third, which is funny. Angular has a lot of usage, even though the satisfaction is one of the lowest. So I don't know what that tells you. Maybe a lot of companies like to use Angular, even though the developers are using it don't necessarily like it as much. I don't know. Of course, Ember's, everything else is pretty low. Like not many people are using Svelte. That's one of the lower ones on the usage scale. So same things with Ember, Alpine, and then I even heard of Stimulus. And you can look at the raw numbers here. You can see here it is. I think this really helps me out. Like 70% love React. Heard of it, would like to learn it. So you have a lot of people who like React are using it today, and just only 10% of people have used it, would not use again React. And then Vue is 7%, so there's very few people who have used Vue that wouldn't use it again, and then still most people are using it and would like to learn. So Vue and React still number 1, number 2, and then Svelte coming up at the bottom, and then things like Angular. See, the problem is here is this is why Angular is so low on the satisfaction, is that it has 33% used it but would not use again. So if you have that many people have used it and wouldn't use it again, it's going to bring down the satisfaction, even though I guess there is a lot of usage for Angular still out there. And Ember is really at the bottom because they have heard of it, were not interested, but not many people have used it. But Not a lot of people have heard it, but they're not interested in it. And then other tools, I haven't even heard of these. Stencil, Aurelia. I think I did some tutorials on Aurelia like 3 years ago, and it really hasn't gone anywhere in the developer world, at least popularity wise. I think there is definitely some usages, and it's a cool framework. It just hasn't gotten to the point where it's on the same graph between React, Vue, Svelte. It's worth mentioning, though, it could one day get up there. And same thing with Stencil. I actually have not used Stencil, but it sounds interesting. And then Nuxt and Next didn't make this graph. So overall happiness, it's a little bit down from last year. I don't know. And by the way, they definitely have quite a few ads this year. Maybe, I don't know if this is more than last year, but Front End Masters has a lot of ads. And don't worry, that's mine. Okay, so back end frameworks. So if you want to do full stack JavaScript, this is probably what you want to look at. Move my head out of the way. So here is everything we have in here. So Satisfaction, Next.js. I think Next.js has just blown up in the last, I don't know, 6 months to a year. I've seen a lot of tutorials on it, a lot of interest. They had a really good conference. And it doesn't surprise me that a lot of people are really loving Next.js. Express has always been really popular for full stack. Never used Fastify. Nuxt, hey, on the Vue side, for the few people that have used it, it's great. I'm glad it's on the survey. I don't think last year, you can see it wasn't on the survey last year, and now it's gotten to the point that people are talking about it. If you love Next, which is like a way to create, it's like a meta framework for React. It uses server-side rendering, and you can also statically generate your sites. You'll love Nuxt because it's the same thing, but on the Vue side. And they have very similar features. You see the interest. Next.js is always really high with the interest. Express is right underneath it. Now usage, definitely Express is probably used the most. Like if you go to most companies, are probably most of them are still using Express, while Next and Nuxt are a lot lower on the scale here, with Fastify at the end. And same thing with awareness. Everybody knows about Express. They know about Next and Gatsby, but some of these other ones not as much. All right, so here's the positive negative split. Once again, Express is the highest that people have used it, probably the most, with the most would use it again or want to learn it. And then at the bottom, things like Meteor is kind of like the Ember.js. It's a really old framework that a lot of people have heard of, but they're not interested in learning because it's probably in the older technology side, even though it's probably still works fine. And then Next is right there, and then Nuxt is right here, which is, I'm surprised it has such a high 40% have heard of it, not interested, but I'm guessing that's because if you're a React developer, you may have heard of Next, but maybe you've heard of Nuxt, but you're not going to worry or learn it because you're a React developer. So I wonder if that's why this is so low down here. So that really surprised me that Express is still gained a lot of popularity and that Next is just jumped up really quickly. All right, so another interesting tidbit is JavaScript tools. I always like to see like what everybody's using and if there's tools that I should be using. So this is no surprise here that Axios is still like the #1 tool. I think it was #1 last year too. And you know, Axios is great because it's basically an HTTP library to connect to the back end. Has some nice features. I know a lot of people are just using Fetch too, but you know this is one I would use. And then Lodash is still really high, and then Moment. I wish Moment would die. I really do not like Moment. The last time I used it, it just uses a ton of space in my bundle size, and you can do everything with Moment just with plain JavaScript. Just takes you a little longer. I mean, obviously you could do a lot of this with plain JavaScript, but I think Moment's not necessary. And there's other date libraries like DataFNS, which is a much smaller imprint that you should use. And in fact, I would say don't even use Lodash if you can. I think it also adds a lot of it's tree shakeable. It's not that big to add into your bundles. But, you know, if you can get out of not using Lodash, I would try to do that too. And jQuery is still holding on here at 21%, which is funny. Maybe it'll always be there. I like RxJS, but it's really only used by the Angular folks. And it never really has been deeply popular in Vue or React. I wish it was, but it isn't. I haven't heard of Luxon, Ramda, or Immer. I don't even know what those are. This is interesting. Other answers. Material UI libraries, Formic, style components. You know, Material UI I think is really popular. A lot of people like these these graphical frameworks that you can add into your projects, and Material UI is one of them. React Query, I need to try this out. A lot of people are talking about it. And then there's a whole bunch of smaller ones, many of which I have not heard, and a lot of them are very React central, like Redux. NGRX, that's on the Angular side, but I don't know why React's in there. 3JS, that's like a graphing. I think that's a graphics library. All right, that's cool. They got Narwhal NX. If you know, that's part of Narwhal. If you want to create mono repos, people are still using those. That's some of the higher ones here. And JavaScript runtimes, Node.js. Text editors, everybody's using VS Code, but if not, Vim is still really popular. Emacs is really, really small. So I think Vim and VS Code. And if you want the best of both worlds, what I do is I use VS Code. Oh, I'll move my head again. I hope if you want to use the best of both worlds, I would look at the Vim plugin for VS Code. That works great. And then IntelliJ, here's some other answers. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Resources. So most people are using like CSS Tricks, Medium, Dev.to. CS Tricks has been around all the way for a very long time. I think it's a great resources. Medium is great. Dev.to, Smashing Magazine, JavaScript Weekly, Kent C. Dodds, Overreact. I mean, these are all great sites I've used pretty often. Other blogs, Hacker News is important. Reddit, I've used that a bunch. One thing I thought was interesting is, by the way, Wes Bos always seems to get a place on these lists. If you go to other answers, looks like 16 people did Traversy Media. So, there's a little bit of YouTube in there. And so did Actimind. So we got a little bit of YouTube representation. The other answer, someone just put YouTube as the other answers for freeform. So people are using YouTube. So if you're watching today, one thing I should do is try to get my name on this. I should be like, please put my name on this. They do have a podcast section. And of course, number one is Syntax. They're really, really popular, and they even mentioned this survey on their show. By the way, I have a podcast called Self-Taught or Not. I'll put a link in the description if you guys are interested. I did not make the survey, which is unfortunate, but maybe next year I'll be like, hey, make sure you put my name in the right box. I have been on Views and View quite a bit. They're pretty high. Enjoy the View. I know those guys. So it's really cool. I also know the guys from JavaScript Jabber, which used to be number one, but they've fallen a little bit. They're still pretty high at 824. And Full Stack Radio, this is pretty popular too, by Adam Wathan. He and Wes Bos, of course, those guys are friends, and they have pretty big podcasts. Okay, last but not least is the opinion section. This is JavaScript moving in the right direction? I don't think this changes too much. Like, pretty much people agree it's moving in the right direction. Is it overly complex? People are neutral to this question. I don't know if what this tells us is like every year people are like, yeah, JavaScript keeps getting more and more complicated, but there's nothing we can do about it. JavaScript is overused online. Like, I don't know, most people say no, I guess. And then you could see here, and I enjoy building JavaScript apps, mostly agree. By the way, look at this shout out from Cassidy to Ben Hong. Netlify, I think, got a little bit of a shout out here. I think a few Netlify developers were very they got a couple of shout outs in this survey. And then agree, I would like JavaScript to be my main programming language. Looks like most people agree on that. That would make sense since this is a JavaScript survey. Is it ecosystem changing too fast? I guess you would say most people are neutral to this. Maybe it isn't going too fast. And most people are happy with the technologies. I don't really think you can figure out what is missing here. I think these questions don't really change that much, and I don't really infer too much from it. This is interesting, though. What do you feel is currently missing from JavaScript? And the number one answer was static typing, which isn't that the point of TypeScript and PureScript and everything else? I mean, we can get it. I guess they want it added into the language, into the ECMAScript language, so they don't have to transpile the code into JavaScript from TypeScript. So I guess maybe that makes sense. And then they want some more stuff in the standard library, pattern matching, pipe operator. All interesting. All right, so that's it for the survey for this year. I want to hear from you guys. Leave a comment below. Is this what you expected? Are you interested in Svelte or Vue? this year. What is your new framework or library that you're going to try to learn? Do you agree or disagree? Leave a comment below. I really appreciate it. Thanks.